Everyone. Welcome to this webinar. My name is Martin Hottass. I'm the Managing Director of City and Guilds Technical Training. Like many of you in the audience, I run a business that provides learning for learners in professional technical skills that are in big demand by employers. At City and Guilds Technical Training, we specialize in infrastructure training, which is predominantly energy and transportation. But obviously, like all of you, we're looking ahead at what skills are required in the future to be able to serve the communities in which we live properly. It's no secret that green construction and engineering skills are going to grow in demand exponentially over the coming years as we meet the plans laid out in the government's Build Back Better and the 10-point plan for the green industrial revolution. I'm sorry, the Build Back Better is something that always trips me up and I should just not use it. So I will also now try and get my clicker to work. And that is a no. I'm so sorry. Technical support, could you please click it forward for me? Thank you so much. So just to set the scene, Building Back Better. So this is the government's plan to kickstart the economy post-COVID. And obviously there has been a recognition that high quality infrastructure is crucial for economic growth, to boost productivity and also to increase our competitiveness. Therefore, government hopes to stimulate the economic recovery by making 600 billion of investment in infrastructure over the next 5 years. This will start this year with the first 100 billion. Hand in hand with that, there is a recognition that the UK lags behind international comparators on the development of technical and basic adult skills. This fund is an attempt to address this by using increased investment in further education, encouraging lifelong learning better, and to align the post-16 education system with employer demand. In practice, this will mean the introduction of the lifetime skills guarantee to enable lifelong learning through free, fully funded level 3 courses. But of course, it comes with a health warning. This is only for those that don't already hold the level 3. Introducing the lifelong loan entitlement and increased investment in apprenticeships. The recent announcement on flexi job apprenticeships and increased employer incentives of up to £3,000 are obviously proof that the government is serious in trying to kickstart the economy in that way. Could we please go to the next slide? So the 10-point plan, so this is much better and it's easier to say, which is really important for me. So the 10-point plan is very important because this is about reaching net zero by 2050 or ideally even sooner. And the government pledged an investment of £12 billion to kickstart the green industrial revolution. This investment is to ensure the recovery from COVID is green and to enable them to meet the government's ambition to reach the target of net zero emissions. In addition to the 12 billion investment, the government hoped to stimulate up to 3 times as much co-investment by the private sector. And it has been stated that this will create 250,000 new jobs and underpins the ambition of the government to be the #1 for green technology and finance. And that obviously goes from offshore wind to hydrogen-powered trains to even potentially advanced nuclear. And this is underpinned by a move to zero-emission vehicles and greener buildings. The question, of course, is how will we get all the skills that we need to create the jobs and fill them with suitably qualified candidates? And how can we upskill existing employees to go on this journey? There's no doubt that apprenticeships will form part of that solution. And indeed, last month, the IFAD announced the formation of a new Green Apprenticeship Advisory Panel, which aims to help to put cleaner and greener apprenticeships at the heart of the UK's recovery from COVID. So there is a lot happening in the sector, and there is a lot of opportunities. And I'm looking forward to discussing this with colleagues from industry in a minute. But before we go to that, I would like to hand over to Andy Durman, who is the Managing Director of the Labour Market Analysts Emsi, to give us a forecast of what the in-demand green skills might be in the years ahead. Andy, you've just publicized a really good podcast on this. Maybe you could give us a very short summary, and over to you.
Thank you very much, Martin, and hello everybody. If you could move on to the next slide, please. Great, so I haven't got my crystal ball out, Martin, unfortunately, in the sense of there's a lot going on out there in terms of the green agenda. But actually, one of the big challenges to get going is actually really understanding what we mean by the green economy in the first place, which is an easy statement to throw out, but actually very difficult when we actually start to think about how do we define it, what does it mean. It's a little bit like tech or creative in the sense that we can define the green economy in different ways. Firstly, thinking about the green sector or industry, so the renewable or zero emissions, R's industry, that sort of stuff. We can also think about green jobs, so some of the key jobs that are driving this green technology. And also, finally, and probably more the foundational piece is thinking about the skills, the green skills that are driving different work. And we might find, for example, that within a green industry, there are non-green jobs. So take the zero emission car production, we might find that there are cleaners employed in there that just do cleaning as we always have done. We also might find there are certain roles that are green roles within a business that isn't necessarily sitting within a green industry. So minimizing waste in a non-green technology industry, for example. So one of the great challenges when we talk about looking to the future, trying to define what the future might look like, is actually trying to define what we mean by green in the first instance. What I've got on the slide though, is a few data points, as this is a sort of emerging field of study when it comes to data. So the Office for National Statistics released some analysis fairly recently on the low carbon and renewable energy economy, which estimated, and this is based off a survey of key employers and scaled up, but estimates the green economy to be around about 43 billion in turnover and around about 200,000 jobs. So a pretty sizable industry already. So there's already a lot to potentially to learn from what's already there, let alone where it's going. Vast majority of that fits within manufacturing, energy and energy supply and infrastructure or construction, probably not a surprise. And obviously that's a big theme to a lot of the Build Back Better, there you are, got it, plan the government has set forward. Interestingly, this survey has found that there hasn't actually been significant growth since 2014 in the whole, but there's been quite significant shifts in the nature of where that work and activity is happening, particularly focusing around low emission vehicles and the infrastructure piece. So one would think that that will snowball in due course. When we try and, because the definition of green is still a bit loose, it's actually quite difficult to find green jobs in traditional labour market information. It's actually something we're looking at Emsi and will be over the coming months be talking a lot more about. So I'd encourage you to keep an eye over our blog and webinar series where we will be attempting to dig a bit deeper into that. But just finally, one thing I've done as an example is just tapped into our job postings analytics, the phrase renewable, which is obviously one dimension. And it's very interesting to see how a graph on the left-hand side, we've seen a doubling in the last 5 years of jobs being advertised that are stating renewable in relation to the green agenda. And on the right-hand side, just showing the last 12 months, shows you the sorts of aggregate occupations that are tagged with renewable. And interesting to see plumbers coming through at the top, sales, engineering. So quite a range of different roles that are playing a different part in the green sector, not just in delivering green activity, but selling it, for example. And so different skills will be needed depending on where you fit within the green jobs revolution ecosystem. So hopefully at least some context is a bit of the here and now that we're starting from, and clues as to where we might look going forward.
Andy, thank you so much. That's a really good insight in what is posted, and what your analysis suggests is a buoyant time to come. So before I get into the panel debate, I'd like to introduce my guests. And Celia, if I could go to you first. I'm really excited about having all of you on board, because it's not very often that we get the opportunity to bring so many experts from different shades of the green spectrum together. So Celia, please, over to you.
Thank you. And it's an absolute delight to be here, because I think I am picking up on some of the things that Andy said. Whether it's a revolution or an evolution is something that perhaps we can pick up as we go through this. I specialise in developing skills strategy, particularly in the energy sector. Majority of my work at the moment is as the director of the People and Skills work stream within the offshore wind sector deal, which was the agreement signed between government and the offshore wind sector to grow the sector. And so we're looking, I mean, we've just released some figures, and I think I need to talk to Andy at some point fairly soon, because the first thing people say is, you know, how many green jobs are you having versus whatever the government's come out with, and it depends on your definition of green. But it's a sector that's looking at spending an average of 11 billion per year for the next 5 years. We will be taking on more people as a result of it. But I think one of the reasons that I was delighted to be offered this opportunity, and you know, more than happy to take it, is the further education sector is so fundamental to what we do moving forwards. And I think before I hand back to my colleagues, I just want to commend them for what they've achieved over the past year, because it has been a huge challenge for everybody. But I think certainly the colleges and universities have stepped up to the mark. And so I think that lays a very good foundation for industry and education moving forwards. But back to you, Martin.
Thank you so much, Celia. And as a veteran of the wind industry, I've entered that in 2006. I can only echo what you say. I mean, the feed-in price for electricity by kilowatt has dropped so much in offshore wind that it's now cheaper than conventional energy generation, which is amazing. And it's a fantastic opportunity for all of us to have better, greener jobs in the sector. But Barry, if I come to you next, because you are maybe the unusual inclusion on this panel, because transportation, as Andy showed, is always seen as a polluter. So what's your view on all of this?
Thank you, Martin. Interestingly, hello everybody, I'm Barry Smith. I'm the Head of Skills and Assessment at the National Skills Academy for Rail. And interestingly, what the audience may not know is that one of NSAR's responsibilities is the external quality assurance of endpoint assessment and apprenticeships. And we do a number of rail standards, as you might expect, but perhaps less well known is we also do a number of logistics standards. We are also the employer-led endpoint EQA for the digital standards at level 3 and level 4, media and skills production, and adult care. So the employer-led model that we developed for rail and its focus on external quality assurance has been something that others have come to us to try and move into other sectors, and we report to different employer groups there. So we've got quite a good feel and look across all different sectors and apprenticeships and what's happening in the green space across all, not just rail. I can sit quite kind of semi-smugly from a rail point of view, because of the emissions in surface transport. In terms of carbon emissions, rail surface transport emissions are only 2% of the total. And this is an interesting agenda for rail, because of course it can improve on those 2% emissions and go for an even better sum, but it can actually drive and help enable the agenda that forces a modal shift from some of the bigger polluters in surface transport. For example, 77% of the emissions in that surface transport areas comes from car and small road vehicles. No doubt any minute now, one of my Amazon delivery small road vehicles will turn up and ring the bell and interrupt the interrupt the panel. 18% comes from HGV and road freight, and I think rail can make a really big dent in that figure as well, and I'll explain a little bit more about that on the go. But really interesting times in terms of how rail can do better and how it actually can drive change and force change in surface transport by bringing about that modal change, pulling people off cars and freight off roads onto rail. Thank you, Martin.
That's great. And I thought you might give me a good segue over to Martin by mentioning hydrogen-powered trams or stuff like that, which you haven't. But Martin, you are involved in an amazing project, which is about hydrogen in the Northwest. So green hydrogen is seen as the biggest driver other than renewable energy in terms of decarbonizing our economy. And clearly hydrogen is only green if the electrolysis happens to be driven by renewable means. Maybe you could say a couple of things about that, and also why Cadent Gas, your employer, is involved in this.
Delighted to be part of the panel. My name is Martin Rimmer. I am the Chief People Officer for Cadent Gas. We directly employ around 6,000 people and probably have something in the region of 6,000 through our supply chain, including local delivery partners who support the gas operation. For me, the green agenda is more of a green transformation for our business, because as a gas delivery network, or we own 4, which forms Cadent Gas, we're the largest gas distribution company in the UK. And what it means is that those employees that we already have, when we think about skills, will need to transition themselves into something different. We have a REPEX program, which is a replacement program that has a finite timeline to it, because we're replacing old gas mains and pipes with new plastic ones, which will have a much longer lifespan. And as a consequence of that, we'll have resource that we'll need to look at how they are deployed. What we will effectively do is put a new product through our network. So if I compare myself to Barry and we talk about trains, it is literally about something completely new running on his track, or completely new going through our pipeline. So we are very, very heavily involved in the schemes that are considering how this will look. And you're absolutely right. Putting a different product through a network is not just going to make us green. It's around the whole end-to-end solution and how that is delivered. And that's why we're heavily involved in a couple of programs, HyNet being one, where we are looking at a regional green operation. We've got sharing a program in the Northeast where we're building hydrogen homes, which will be a showcase location to go and see what a hydrogen gas fire in your home looks like, what a hydrogen cooker will look like, what a hydrogen boiler will look like, because that will be what the future looks like for us. And finally, before I hand back to you, I think when we talk about skills, there's a tendency immediately to go into that technical world. The individual with the toolkit who's technically looking at how hydrogen will be the fuel of the future. Actually, I think there is a broader challenge around all the other skills that we're going to need around thinking on how to tackle the green agenda, research and development skills, environmental impact skills, because initially your thought pattern goes straight to, I used to use this spanner to do this work, now I'm going to use this spanner to do the work. And actually there's a huge, huge broader set of skills required, and we'll get into that through the questioning.
That's absolutely awesome. Thank you so much. And you have provided me with the ideal segue into our first question. Question 1. What green skills are going to be the most in demand in the future? And how does the skill system need to change to meet the demand? So clearly for our audience who are either college principals or working in colleges or for independent training providers, this is a really critical question, because ultimately I don't know of any college, and if I'm wrong, then I do apologize in advance, but if I just use City and Guilds Technical Training, is an example. We certainly couldn't bet on all horses. We have to look at where we add the highest value to the communities that we serve. And I'm sure all of the people in the audience will ask themselves the same question. Celia, how would that manifest itself in the offshore wind sector?
I could actually speak for the rest of the hour quite comfortably answering those two questions, so I'll restrain myself. I think one of the key points to this is a lot of the workforce are going to be on a regional or cluster basis. And so, and a lot of them come through the apprenticeship route. I think picking up on the skills side of things, and I'll echo what Martin was saying, in that a lot of the skills are not green, it's just where you apply them. So we are still short of engineering skills throughout UK. And I hate to say it, I hope that this provides a catalyst actually to try and address that, because after many, many years of looking at it, we just don't have enough technical and engineering skills coming through. We need project managers, we need project management, we need finance skills, we all need legal skills coming through. Some of them will be apprentices, and I think something else I'd like to pick up on later on is apprentices are not just for the young, and in the offshore wind sector, we use them for both technical and non-technical, but also the ability to bring in people at degree level as they transfer from other sectors. And so, you know, that's actually fairly fundamental as we move forwards. I think the digital specialisms are going to be key to a lot of what we're doing moving forwards, because certainly during the pandemic, the digital skills come forwards. And I mean, things like the increased use of drones is something that we've looked at and, you know, considering more use over the past year, or cybersecurity, big data analytics, as well as the other ones that Martin picked up on. But I think some of this is about thinking differently. I think the other thing, I'd like to separate skills and knowledge. And I think we're going to end up with a lot of people trying to work out how they fit. And so I'll pick up on the way that, for example, the Energy Skills Partnership in Scotland have handled it. So they have the online awareness courses, because people need to have an understanding of how they may fit into the new sector, or how they may transfer their skills. And it doesn't necessarily need a training course for that. It needs a greater access to information. I'll stop on that part, because, as I say, I could carry on for quite a lot longer on some of the systems changes that need to happen, because there's some fairly fundamental changes that do need to happen. But I think I'd be interested in hear what other people have to say about the skills, and then perhaps we can pick up on that afterwards.
That's great. Thank you, Celia. Barry, maybe I come to you next, because the railway sector, of course, has got a very unique footprint, in as much as that we still have Victorian infrastructure running side to side with brand new digital infrastructure. How will all of this change the face of the railways?
And we're going to have to innovate ourselves out of that space, I can tell you. There are two big kind of themes running through rail and rail of the future. The first one we've touched on, that's the decarbonisation agenda and net zero. And the second one is the digitization of the rail space. In electrification of the lines and the routes is going to be key, actually, for the decarbonisation in the agenda, to get an all-electric railway. To do that, we're going to need design engineers, electrification engineers, overhead lines related trades, fitters, assistant engineers in that kind of HNC, HND space, rail systems engineers in the degree space. And the apprenticeship frameworks that we're working on for the rail engineering are actually shaping up to respond quite nicely to that. But picking up on Celia's point, there's a real issue here in terms of more capacity needed. So more new existing of the existing roles, and we're looking much more at a greening of existing roles as opposed to new green jobs. So there's much more of a focus than that on that, and much more of a need to look very carefully now and start valuing more upskilling on the digitization. And the way to the electrification of the railway, there are these transition technologies. Martin talked about the kind of hydrogen trains and the battery trains and the bi-mode trains. Nowhere near as efficient as electrified trains, much more efficient than the diesel rolling stock, and a good bridging technology to get us towards full electrification. And there again, there are some skills related to the greening of existing jobs in terms of the installation and the deinstallation of existing technology and the replacement with new technologies within the rolling stock to upgrade and make that bridge. In the digitization space, this is quite an interesting one, because there's going to be much more of a focus on the kind of digital signaling, data analysis. Now, why are these green jobs? Well, actually, it's to do with the increased efficiency of the existing railway and the new structure and the railway systems. And that increased efficiency and productivity and timeliness, all the things that get us really quite grumpy about our railways. The digitization of that will help. And that will help draw people away from the other modes of transport, surface transport. If we get the railways that we want and we deserve, digitization will help. That will pull people from cars. And then, of course, there's that big dent we can make in the freight situation. But if I come back to how we can potentially do that, we need to look at vocational education and training as much more than just initial vocational education and training. A lot of our focus is on how we get started with young people. But we actually need now to move away from initial vocational education and training, look at it more broadly, back to the kind of concepts of lifelong learning, and look at it much more. And this is where upskilling comes in. And for me, we need a much better way of valuing and recognizing upskilling. It needs to be a much more systematic and potentially regulated way. Remember, in terms of how we used to base upskilling with the national occupational standards, well, we've kind of left them to the Celtic fringes now, in terms of Northern Ireland, Scotland and Wales persisting with them. So we need a systematic way of valuing, recognizing upskilling, because actually it's the reskilling, the upskilling, the greening of people's continued professional development. It's going to be much, much more important. And this will also help mitigate some of the risk of our potentially over-focusing on apprenticeships and occupational roles, where the risk in doing that is we lose out on the transferability of labour mobility. And the upskilling package can sit alongside that and start to appeal beyond the initial vet, but also to this kind of labour mobility as well. So for me, the big changes that are needed is that valuing of what's happening with upskilling, but also upgrading the quality of upskilling. If it means regulation, let's look at regulation, but let's get it systemic and let's get it systematic. And that's kind of key for me in those areas.
That's great, Barry. Thank you so much. Andy, if I come to you, you obviously look at this for a living, so you look at all the statistics. How do you see similar trends, sort of in the macroeconomic sense?
Yeah, and for pleasure, Martin, of course. No, so yes, absolutely. And it's fascinating. I think Celia and Barry have mentioned some really pertinent points that I think go back to my very dry introduction of let's define this thing first of all, because to know what to do about it, we first need to kind of define it. And I think what Celia touched on around, actually they may not necessarily be green roles, but are critical to the green industry, I think is a really important one. We don't want to overlook some of those kind of foundational things because they don't fit into the new and sexy arena. Barry's point about the greening of jobs, and I think it was really interesting to see from my data, plumbers up there in the renewable, there's a perfect example of a job that has been greened over time. And of course, for new entrants to the labour market, doing that from the get-go is great, but as Barry says, let's not forget the significantly higher volume of workers that are already in the workforce that are not going to be leaving to educate themselves for 3 years to come back again, and we need to evolve that. And I think so we need to be really, really mindful of the different dimensions that are at play here, and study the data both for fun and work, to really kind of look for the signs in that there. And I think in terms of the skill system, therefore, it needs to reflect exactly what has just been said. There's not a one size fits all. We need a route to bringing new talent through, or where there's fundamental new roles, that probably lends itself really well to your traditional education. But that whole, and this is just another example in many examples that we've discussed in panel sessions like this over the years, around just that ongoing topping up of skill sets, and even micro skills within skills, just different ways of doing a similar thing, to Martin's point, this spanner or that spanner, as well as the broader knowledge and context there. So, and I think one thing, just think about where do we see, how do we see what's coming down the line? There's an element of clues in what's happening now and seeing those evolve. There's also a lot of work going on now in the sense of industry catapult foresighting, so almost connecting academic development to real world workforce needs, which has been a massive gap for so long. Lots of great innovation happening and no one asking the question, so how can we roll this out? Ultimately, how do we get the workforce to deliver on this? And I've certainly been involved and picked up on significantly more intentional connections there that should help to foresight what new skills are coming down, or where those skills are used elsewhere in the labor market, but are not yet put within one particular industry. So yeah, lots to explore from what's actually happening right now, let alone foresighting.
That's great insights. Thank you so much, everybody, for sharing. What I'm hearing is that it's a patchwork of solutions that we need, and that really is a fantastic segue to question number 2, because clearly you all identified that apprenticeships should play a role. It would be great to hear maybe from you, Martin, first, what role you think apprenticeships and vocational education should play in meeting the green skills needs.
Okay, I mean, if I may, Martin, I just wanted to just reference the question 1 for 30 seconds. I think we perhaps just skimmed over the fact around the system, and I have been very vocal before around, the system needs to change as well in readiness for what's coming down the timeline to us. I think there's a huge amount of complication in there, stroke red tape. It's got to change to be relevant to what we're trying to. When I said the system, I actually mean, the funding, where it comes from, how you access it, who sees it. The whole, dare I say, government offering needs to reinvent itself to make sure that it does have the impact that we want it to, but also that it's accessible. And I think that needs to start now. It is no use coming along in 3, 4, 5 years' time when there's an expectation that we're on the road to something and find that there are still changes required. I referenced at some point in the notes I made, the T-level qualification has just become so broad and so twisted out of shape that it's no use to Cadent anymore. So I think, sometimes there's a belief that complexity adds value. And I think in this case, we must absolutely be united in our stand to say, the simpler this is, the better it becomes for organisations, employers, and other training organisations, for example, to be able to access it and use it. When it comes to the question number 2, and apprenticeships and vocational education, well, my opening sort of few words reference the fact that we have a directly employed workforce of 6,000 people. Last year, we pat ourselves on the back as Cadent and say we took on more apprentices than we've ever taken before, and that was in the region of about 70 in year, which put us with about 140 apprentices on our books as it stands today. That intake will absolutely never address the challenge that we've got in this space. So for me, it's absolutely critical that we adapt and embed the resource and the skill sets that we have today, and that there's a transformation program. We're spending around £14 million each year over the next 5 years to continue to train our existing resources. Now, that's a drop in the ocean when you think of the numbers quoted, £11 billion a year on this agenda. But nevertheless, it's considerable. And what we're beginning to understand is what the skills will be required at the time of implementing hydrogen in our network, and what the gap is today. We are absolutely committed to vocational education. We are absolutely committed to apprentices, but I can't recruit 5,000 or 6,000 apprentices between now and say 2026. In order to fill a skills gap, what I've got to do is use everything that Andy talked about with transitional or transformational skills into a different role to address the challenge that we've got with our different product.
That's great.
But I think hugely important in the sense of, I think it was Celia that said we must never forget that apprenticeships are not necessarily for young people. And we must tap into the vast resource that is available, but certainly within Cadent, our primary focus has to be, to a certain extent, using the resource we've got and making sure they're fit for purpose.
Thank you, Martin. That's very comprehensively answered. Barry, if I come to you next, how the railway sector is not renowned for having too many apprentices either.
No, and actually, I'm quite confident that in rail engineering space anyway, we're going through a process of rewriting the rail engineering standards from level 2 to level 7 now. I think we've got this covered actually in terms of the realising the agenda. It's well set out in some of the documentation about what needs to happen to rail, and I'm seeing this greening come through into the standards. But looking at vocational education slightly more broadly, I think the education and skills system needs to be able to respond and change. And I think there are a few things that we need to resolve. When it comes to the apprenticeship space and to vocational education and training itself, we need to sort out what we want to do with qualifications and how qualifications relate to apprenticeships. We need to work out how they lead into, how they support, how they build from apprenticeships. Because at the moment, it's a bit messy and it's a bit inconsistent, and we're not really sure about the relationship between qualifications and assessment. Are they mandated? Are they in? Are they out? And we need to sort this out and really make it work. I do worry about the vocational education and training's obsession with big things. Apprenticeships are big things. T-levels are big things. And I often wonder that actually the solutions very often are in bundling smaller things together, more bespoke, more responsive ways to do it. And it's quite ironic now looking at the way the T-level has evolved. There's actually more flexibility on offer in how an academic or a general student doing general qualifications puts their diet together, their subjects together. There's more flexibility for them than there is in actually the T-levels. And I'm not sure that we've lost sight of that kind of responsiveness and the need to actually broaden out a little bit within the vocational education and training space as well. So the kind of obsession with big things to solve big solutions worries me a little bit. We need to also start looking much more closely at badging in terms of qualifications and start to think about qualifications and VET 2.0 for the future. The automatic assumption is the solution going forward is to look in the rear view mirror and look at what we've always done. So we need to begin to have a discussion about badging and embrace credentialing and look at what can be done in this space to help out, harking back to my earlier point about upskilling. Because actually, the way things are evolving, I'm not entirely sure or convinced that qualifications are a good proxy for competence. And so we need to look at actually how we evolve that and look to new ways and rather than rear view mirror and old solutions. The other key thing for me, this is about how we make this system more responsive, more adaptable, more resilient. And we're nowhere near, I think, where we need to be and actually capturing, recognizing, and using labour market intelligence and labour market insight quick enough to get it through and pulled through into the vocational education and training, pulled through into the apprenticeships, so we're in good shape with what we've got to take to young people and adults about the offer. So I think we've kind of lost our way a little bit on that labour market insight and intelligence and getting that quick and through in a responsive way. And that might be because of our obsession with big things. It might be because of the processes that Martin alluded to earlier, everything taking an age. But I think we do need to be a bit more agile. And if we're going to talk about new jobs, green jobs, we need to look at new systems and quicker, smarter, more agile ways and different types of thinking, because I'm pretty sure looking forward, the solution isn't to be found in the rearview mirror.
That's great, Barry. Thank you. Celia, your industry has gone from quantum leap to quantum leap in terms of creation of energy. So when I started this in 2006, it was what, 700 kilowatt, and if you could fix a tractor, you could basically work on a turbine because it was a fan belt and a gearbox. And now it's obviously all mechatronics. How would this play in your sector?
It's as important as it used to be. However, we're now using both the electrical skills and the mechanical skills, depending on the age of the turbine. I think there's a couple of things, without repeating what other people have said, because a number of points that Barry said that, I could go tick, yeah, tick, I've got them on my list. I think the speed of response is critical. If you look at the speed that the industry in the broadest sense, and I'm not just talking offshore wind, is changing, to have apprentices on an annual cycle is not quick enough. And if we want to change something, you have to wait until probably 2 years down the road. One of the concerns we've got at the moment is by the time somebody's gone on to an apprenticeship, they've done their 3 years, the technology's out of date. And so trying to find ways that we can accelerate the speed of change within the apprenticeships, as well as what can we do to change the annual cycle. They all start in September. I do recognise that some of the non-technical don't. On a rolling basis, that's useful. But moving forwards, I question whether that's the best way of doing it into the future. So I'll keep it short because I know we've got quite a lot of stories to cover. But I think that's probably the top of my list.
Thank you, Celia. And in the interest of time, if I go on to our final question and maybe ask Andy to come in on that, because you clearly all three have identified that apprenticeships are not the panacea, and sometimes you need a much speedier response. And one of the interesting topics that raises is maybe the green agenda could be a vehicle to create a more diverse workforce by engendering social mobility. And Andy, I know in some of your research you found that obviously that those who need work the most are the most adversely affected through the pandemic. Could you maybe give us some background data on that before I open it up to the panel?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there are clearly vulnerable parts of the labour market that are exposed, and the last 12 months has been a living experiment when it comes to understanding that. And so, good chunks of the economy have absolutely thrived throughout this period as it's helped to really drive change. Other elements have just fallen behind, and it does come down to a lot of that skills transferability, skills resilience. And so I think in relation to the question that you've got on the screen, or we're asking around the kind of the ability to kind of use this as a vehicle for change around diversity and social mobility, absolutely, because this has a brand now, right? It has it is a thing, and we can use that brand and that opportunity to really identify what do we mean. Back to my definition piece of where the opportunity lies in terms of different green industries, green jobs, and how people from in roles that are in vulnerable sectors, and COVID is one example, but of course automation is another factor, that and Brexit and the trade impact and so on and so forth, where we're in vulnerable sectors, those same roles and ultimately skills might be just as valuable, if not more, in a more solid, sustainable, quite literally, sector to go through. So I think this is a fantastic opportunity, but like with so many things, and like the environment we've been in now, only really if we're intentional about it. If we just let people find their way, we know those that are the furthest away will probably struggle. So there are plenty of interventions and opportunities for interventions. And right now, quite frankly, where we can maybe embrace this as an opportunity to think about that transitioning workforce. But to come back to your previous questions, and certainly the last one, we need to think quite creatively about how we transition people through using the power of education. And to that point, it can't be just about the big new starters to the labour market and anyone who's in there, well, give it a go, see if you can find your way. But if not, sorry. Having that balance of the smaller bite size, the badging, the credentialing is a perfect example as a vehicle that is well used around the world to support that agenda, and used in the UK ever more so. the reality is bringing new entrants to the labour market tends to be focusing towards these bigger education, as Martin put it, but that only works, in my view, if we have the smaller bite-size pieces that can adapt the big education, because the big education is all about the foundations. Have we got the right foundations? And to Celia's point, right back at the beginning, think about knowledge as well as skills. So we've got the right human skills as well as technical skills. It's the ongoing badging, et cetera, that really should help us then evolve people. And that's as much about helping people move through the labour market as it is start at the right point.
Great, thank you. Martin, you're obviously an employer of a blue chip company. How would this play into your social mobility agenda?
So I think what is a huge advantage is that we are looking at what is effectively a high net brand. And with a brand, you can begin to market yourself in a certain way. Historically, and if we focus just primarily on sort of male, female, historically, gas industry is not attractive to women in the slightest, and we are faced with a huge legacy challenge around equalisation in our organisation and making sure that we are diverse and inclusive. The beauty of a brand that is exciting in its own sense, it means that we can attract different people. We can go out, we can look, and we can inspire future generations through that high net brand, and we can start now early on in that education process, if you like, in schools and colleges with strategy and talk about what is coming and grab everyone, rather than you typically going into a gas engineering environment and guess what, it's typically male, and guess what, it's what the lads do and not what the girls do. We can start to create high net work experience and research opportunities that drive some excitement. And again, that creates that inclusivity. There's no differential between who can do that. We can, look at high net pathways via all our partners, because we're a partner in high net as a principal, so we can start looking at supply chain and reaching out into communities, further out than just the Cadent gas network. We're a large network, but there is a geography outside our Cadent gas network. And then, there's so much we can do around achieving net zero. And we do know, I think already, and somebody shared this statistic with me, it's not one that I knew, that green jobs are just already more attractive to women than females. So we have quite a lot of positive things that we can use as tools to help drive that diversity and inclusion in what's coming forward. And I think using Barry's reference, and I don't think we can do anything about what's in the rearview mirror. It's actually about what's in front of us, and what we can start to do is to lay some really great foundations about the future years ahead, and starting, if you like, from scratch with this sort of new brand, this high net brand.
That's great. Thank you, Martin. Celia, if I just build on this, the wind industry has from day one attracted a more diverse workforce, because a lot of young people want to do the right thing, and they found this industry very attractive. Could this now be an additional driver for your industry to grow?
I wish that was true. And if I go back to my oil and gas days, we looked at the offshore wind industry as that sexy thing over there that would attract the full diversity. The industry has set a target to increase the proportion of women to 33%, because it's only at 18%. It's about 30% for graduate level roles. So we still haven't achieved that. However, we're exactly the same position as everybody else when it comes to the technical roles. Apprentice technicians, about 3%. So we know we've got a lot of work to do. And I think on this one, just before we came on, I had a quick look at a number of college websites. And I typed in the words green jobs, net zero, sustainability, decarbonisation, and not one of them came back with anything. And so picking up on, you know, Andy and Martin's point about branding, we've got a really exciting opportunity to put this across differently. However, if the front door looks exactly the same, why are different people going to go through it? The other point is we're still calling it engineering. And we know that that puts off a lot of people because they either don't believe they're smart enough to do it, or, you know, that's the dirty occupation that, you know, other people do. It isn't. It's about solving the world's problems. It's about dealing with climate change. I didn't see that. Now, you know, there probably are colleges that are branding it along those lines, and there probably are universities. I just didn't see them when I was going through it. So I think on the diversity front, there also needs to be more of the lecturers and tutors that are diverse as well, because at the moment, there's a lot going on in industry. Industry's recognised how much it needs to change, but there's only so much that we can do getting young people out of education. The college needs to attract them, the universities need to attract them. And we also recognise as an industry, there's bits that we need to do coming out at the other end to ensure they come into the green jobs, including offshore wind. So I think there's a lot that needs to be done, but it's everybody needs to do a bit. It's not just certain areas to get a change. And it's not one thing. There's a long list of things people need to change. So we do make the most of this huge opportunity to be more diverse, and as well as to enable that social mobility.
Thank you so much. We're rapidly running out of time. Barry, this is your elevator pitch, 1 minute.
I'm just thinking, actually, there's something in my mind, and I haven't quite got the sequencing right, but there's a kind of vague formula where young people are leading us to diversity, and that's leading us to green. I don't know which order you put them in, but there's a definite connection between that kind of triad, a kind of holy trinity there. And the more young people you bring in, the more diversity you get, the more green you get, the more challenge to groupthink you get, the better diversity of thought you get. And I'm actually seeing that in some of the working groups and the inclusivity, because for me, you get to diversity by being inclusive. And that's the really important thing. But in terms of the elevator pitch and some final thoughts, I don't know if this is my school's background, but all learning, all education ultimately contributes to the green agenda. I think any education helps in that contribution. And so for me, we need to re-engage, we need to increase adult participation in formal and informal learning. And then we need to make sure we take everyone who wants to and needs to with us on this journey. So that's back to that inclusivity piece. It's grabbing with both hands the kind of leveling up agenda. It's embracing things like Kickstart and looking at the diversity and the inclusiveness that brings us, and the opportunity to really change things there. So we've got to take everybody with us on this. It can't be for the some. We also need to get the qualifications working with apprenticeships. We need to look at badging and credentialing, and then create a quality framework of upskilling in CPD as the catalyst for bringing more people with us, bringing more people in, and those upskilling. And maybe stop the obsession with big things. Lots of little things and more bespoke packages, because big things are big commitments. And who's able to make big commitments these days? We're all time poor. Young people want to try their hands at different things. So, you know, coming at the market and coming at them with big things, big commitments, is probably not the best way to include and to bring people with us.
That's great. Thank you, Barry. We have 2 minutes left. I just wanted to ask you whether you had any final thoughts. What advice would you give colleges and independent training providers so that they can meet your requirements? And I open that up to whoever wants to answer it. And thank you so much for your contribution. It's given us a lot of food for thought, but whoever wants to go first.
I'll chuck in my first one fairly quickly. This is not just about training people. This is about social and economic recovery.
Yeah, I'll jump in now. Thank you, Celia. And to answer Barry's point from earlier, I do think, you know, studying the data, I would say this, wouldn't I, but studying the data and particularly looking at the details around the small things as well as the big things, rather than agonizing over what the world might look like in 30 years. Let's think about the fact that it's happening now and evolving slowly within our workforce. So tracking the data as well as triangulating with experts like we have on this panel and hearing what they're saying is going to be critical.
Thank you. Martin and Barry, we've got 1 minute.
For me, it's about looking at the resources we've got and the transformation piece, because I do not believe that we can manage the future of HiNet with just new entrants. We've got to retain the people. We've got to grow on the skills we've got. We've got to transform those skills into what's needed, and at the same time welcome new people into the industry from all backgrounds, all social circumstances, and take them on the journey with us.
Thank you. Shall I just close it here? And first of all, let me thank all of you for your generous giving up your time to contribute to this panel, and to the audience for listening. Thank you very much. Be safe, and I'm sure we speak again in the future. Bye bye.